You are closer to rock bottom than you have ever been in your life, and you know it. You feel it every time you open your banking app and the number is smaller than it was last week. You feel it at the grocery store when you put something back because the math in your head said no before your hand reached the shelf. You feel it at 2 a.m. when you are lying in bed doing calculations on bills that do not add up, no matter how many times you run them. And you feel it in the pit of your stomach every single morning when the alarm goes off and you realize that today is going to cost more than yesterday and you are going to earn the exact same amount. You have not told anyone how bad it is. You smile at work. You say fine when people ask. You keep going because stopping is not an option. But something inside you knows that the distance between where you are right now and the person sleeping in their car in the parking lot down the street is not as far as it used to be. And that terrifies you more than anything you have ever felt. Brookings confirmed it yesterday. 45% of American households cannot make ends meet. 771,000 people were counted homeless on a single night, the highest ever recorded. And most of them have jobs. 530,000 families go bankrupt every year because someone got sick. 14 million children are hungry. The government just proposed cutting the program that keeps 6 million families from losing electricity. And a man who worked 20 years in corporate America emptied every retirement account he ever had and said the word that nobody in this country wants to say out loud: survive. He did it just to survive. This video is about the millions of Americans who have already hit the bottom you are afraid of. And it is about the one thing they discovered when they got there that changed everything. 771,000 Americans were counted sleeping on the street on a single night, and that number is the highest in the history of the country, and most of them have jobs. USA Facts confirmed it. The number of people experiencing homelessness in the United States hit an all-time high in 2024 at over 771,000 people counted on a single January night. That is up 18% from 2023 and up 32% from 2022. A 32% increase in 2 years. And here is the detail that separates this crisis from every previous version of homelessness in American history. These are not the people you think they are. CNN published a long-form investigation in March 2026 by author Brian Goldstone titled "Inside the Shadow Realm of the Affordability Crisis." And the thesis is devastating. He said the traditional story about people experiencing homelessness is a myth. He said most of America's homeless live in an invisible shadow realm because even though they work full-time, they cannot afford a stable place to live. Working full-time, showing up to a job every morning, clocking in, doing their shift, clocking out, and then going to sleep in a car, a storage unit, a tent, a motel, or on a friend's couch because the paycheck they just earned does not cover a roof. The Urban Institute published a Key Challenges report 3 weeks ago, confirming that homelessness is primarily driven by unaffordable housing and that far too many U.S. households continue to struggle to afford rent. Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies documented 22.6 million renter households that are severely cost-burdened, meaning they spend more than 50% of their income on rent. 50%, half of everything they earn goes to a landlord, and the other half has to cover food, gas, insurance, phone, medicine, clothing, and everything else that a human being requires to function. And for millions of them, the math does not work. So they choose. They choose between rent and eating, between rent and medicine, between rent and keeping the car that gets them to the job that pays the rent. And eventually, for 771,000 of them on that single night in January, the math collapsed entirely and they ended up outside. And Goldstone documented what the shadow realm actually looks like. It looks like extended stay motels in the exurbs where families of 4 live in a single room with a mini fridge and a microwave. It looks like storage units where a man builds a bed out of plywood and hides from the facility manager. It looks like a Walmart parking lot at 3 a.m. where a woman in scrubs is sleeping in her Camry because she works the early shift at the hospital and cannot afford the apartment within driving distance. It looks like an 87-year-old veteran in the reference footage who is splitting a studio with a roommate and working at Costco 3 days a week because Social Security does not cover rent. And the racial dimension is staggering. Goldstone documented that although Atlanta is no longer a majority black city, 93% of families experiencing homelessness there are black. Every person in line at the food pantry was black. The eviction courtroom was almost entirely black. And across the country, black Americans are 4 times more likely to experience homelessness than white Americans, even though they represent 13% of the population. And the government's response to 771,000 people on the street has not been to build housing. HUD's Continuum of Care program, the main federal homelessness program, had its permanent housing funding capped from 87% to 30%, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. That would take housing assistance away from over 170,000 formerly homeless people in 2026 if fully implemented. The government is not solving homelessness. The government is manufacturing more of it, and 22 states are now considering or have passed legislation based on the Cicero Institute's framework, which criminalizes sleeping outside, involuntarily institutionalizes mentally ill people, and builds camps outside cities to house unhoused populations out of sight. The response to 771,000 people hitting rock bottom is not to give them a floor, it is to make the rock bottom invisible. Working Americans are quietly moving into storage units, cars, and tents because rent now costs more than their entire paycheck and nobody calls it homelessness because they still have a job. There is a phrase that CNN used that I cannot get out of my head: the shadow realm. That is what they called the space between having a home and being on the street. The space where millions of Americans are right now, not on the official count, not in a shelter, not in a tent city that a news helicopter can film, living in the invisible gap where they are technically not homeless because they have a roof of some kind, but functionally homeless because that roof is a 10 by 15-foot storage unit that costs $150 a month and has no plumbing, no electricity, and no legal right to be occupied by a human being. Or that roof is the backseat of a 2014 Honda Accord in a hospital parking lot. Or that roof is a $1.55 a night motel that eats their entire paycheck and gives them a bed, a TV, and a hot plate. And the person in the reference footage described it from the inside. She was just starting a new business. She was building a financial future. And then she was evicted. And she said, "I have no home. I do not even know where to go anymore. All I keep doing is driving back and forth on highways. We spend all our time in the car. I cannot even cook dinner anymore because it is getting colder outside." She was not a drug addict. She was not mentally ill. She was not unemployable. She was an entrepreneur who got evicted and could not find anything she could afford. And now she drives back and forth on highways because there is nowhere to stop. And the man in the reference footage who built an apartment inside a storage unit told viewers to be a ghost if you want to survive. Those are his words. Be a ghost. He is describing the survival strategy for a working American in 2026. Make yourself invisible. Do not let the manager see you. Do not let the neighbors know. Do not attract attention. Because if anyone finds out you are living in a 10 by 15 metal box, they will evict you from the only shelter you can afford. And the scale of this shadow homelessness is almost impossible to measure precisely, because the people inside it are doing everything they can to hide. They park their cars in different lots each night, so security does not notice a pattern. They shower at Planet Fitness for $10 a month. They charge their phones at public libraries. They do their laundry at 2 a.m. at 24-hour laundromats when nobody else is there. And they go to work in the morning looking as normal as the person in the cubicle next to you, because the last thing they can afford to lose is the job that is not paying them enough to afford a home, but is the only thing standing between their current shadow existence and the actual street. And the numbers behind the shadow realm explain why it is growing. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition documented that there is no state, no county, and no city in the United States where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a 2-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. Not one. Anywhere. In the entire country. And Harvard documented that 22.6 million renters are severely cost-burdened, and 20.3 million homeowners are cost-burdened. And the Century Foundation found that 250 million Americans will face health insurance premium increases in 2026 that far exceed inflation and wage growth, meaning the remaining budget after housing and insurance shrinks even further. And for the people at the margin, the ones who were holding on by a thread, the ones who had just enough to cover rent, and just enough to cover the car payment, and just enough to cover food if they skipped lunch twice a week, the $12 gas, and the $300 grocery bill, and the insurance that doubled, and the property tax that jumped, and the prescription that went up 40%. Any one of those was the thing that snapped the thread. And they fell into the shadow realm. And they are there right now, working, driving, parking, sleeping, hiding, in the richest country in the history of the world. And you have walked past them today without knowing. Number 8. 530,000 American families declare bankruptcy every year because someone in their house got sick and the hospital sent them a bill that ended their financial life. The American Human Rights Initiative Foundation published a report on April 30, 2026 that opens with a man named George Curley. He worked his whole life, started as a warehouse worker, moved up to forklift driver, then production line at a ceramic tile factory near Dallas. He had health insurance through his employer. He followed every rule, And then an industrial accident at work, an accident that was his employer's fault, changed everything. Even though his employer was responsible, even though he had insurance, George ended up with $20,000 in medical debt. His credit score was destroyed. He could not get a car loan. Employers ran credit checks and rejected him for better jobs. One injury, one bill. An entire life derailed. And George is one of 100 million American adults who have medical debt according to Governing magazine. 100 million, 1 in 3 working-age adults is currently in debt because of medical or dental bills according to the Commonwealth Fund. And 66.5% of all bankruptcies in the United States are tied to medical expenses. That is not a plurality. That is a supermajority. 2 out of every 3 Americans who lose everything in bankruptcy lose it because someone in their family got sick. 530,000 families per year file for bankruptcy because of healthcare costs. And here is the part that should make your blood boil. Having insurance does not protect you. The woman in the reference footage who paid $2,000 a month for Blue Cross Blue Shield, $24,000 a year, discovered that her insurance made healthcare more expensive, not less. Her ER visit cost $1,760 with insurance and would have cost $1,200 without it. Her MRI cost $960 with insurance and $400 without. She was paying a premium for the privilege of being charged a premium. And 43% of U.S. adults are underinsured according to verified bankruptcy research, meaning their coverage has deductibles and out-of-pocket costs so high that it provides almost no protection when they actually need it. The average family with medical debt owed $18,660, a 50% increase from 5 years earlier according to Governing's reporting. And 50% of all negative marks on credit reports come from medical debt. One unpaid hospital bill can drop your credit score by 200 points overnight. And with a destroyed credit score, you cannot rent an apartment, buy a car, get a job that requires a credit check, or qualify for a loan. Medical debt does not just bankrupt you financially. It locks you out of every system that allows you to function as a citizen. Hospitals can sue you. They can garnish your wages. KFF Health News published an investigation in Colorado documenting that healthcare providers and debt collectors are biting from people's paychecks to cover old medical bills and that this aggressive collection practice is widespread even in a state with strong consumer protections. 8 states are now considering legislation just to limit wage garnishment for medical bills, and the CFPB, which had been trying to keep medical debt off credit reports, reversed course in October 2025 under the current administration, concluding that states cannot bar medical debt from credit reports. The one federal protection that existed was removed, and the Foundation's report put a number on the trapped population that I cannot get out of my head. 52 million Americans earn $15 an hour or less, and medical debt keeps them there, keeps them trapped, at the bottom, not because they stopped working, not because they made bad choices, because they got sick in a country where getting sick is a financial crime punishable by the destruction of everything you ever built. That is rock bottom, and 100 million Americans are on it right now. And 530,000 families per year are finding out there is nothing underneath it. 13 million American children went hungry last year while their parents worked full-time jobs, and the government just cut the only program that was feeding them. 14 million children in the United States live in food-insecure households according to the USDA. And in 381,000 of those households, children are experiencing very low food security, which means they are not just food insecure. They are skipping meals, going entire days without eating, feeling hunger pains while sitting in a classroom trying to learn math. And the parents of those children are not unemployed. Most of them work. Many of them work more than one job. They are the parents in the reference footage, the family where the husband works 3 jobs as a state police officer, a computer technician, and a bartender. And the wife stays home because daycare costs more than his salary. And they have $230 in their checking account, and $119 in EBT benefits, and the food they just ordered will not last 2 weeks. She said on camera, "This is the America that we live in. And before you say that people sit on their ass and you have to pay for it, just remember you are only getting about $36 a year taken out of your check for someone to receive EBT. And they are not making it, not even a little bit. And now the program that was keeping millions of those children fed is being cut. SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which feeds 42 million Americans, including 17 million children, has been slashed. Benefit amounts have been reduced. Work requirements have been tightened. And the agencies that track food insecurity, the ones that produce the data that tells the country how many children are going hungry, have themselves been gutted. The USDA terminated its food security tracking reports. You cannot fix a crisis you refuse to measure. And the school lunch program, which for millions of children is the only guaranteed meal they receive in a day, is under pressure from budget cuts at both the state and federal level. The Fordham Institute's analysis from March 2026 documented chronic absenteeism across the country and described a new lost generation that is disengaged, aimless, and adrift. And one of the reasons children are absent is hunger. A child who did not eat breakfast because there was no food in the house does not have the cognitive energy to sit in a classroom for 6 hours. A child who knows there is nothing to eat when they get home does not feel motivated to learn. Hunger does not just affect the body, it affects the brain. It affects attention. It affects behavior. It affects the ability to form memories. And it affects the trajectory of an entire life. Because a child who is chronically hungry in elementary school arrives at middle school behind, arrives at high school further behind, and either drops out or graduates without the cognitive foundation that a nourished child builds naturally. And the Century Foundation documented that 34% of American adults skipped a meal in the past year because of cost. Among adults under 30, it was 54%. More than half of young adults are skipping meals, and 24.2% of all adults reported food insecurity according to the Urban Institute. In the richest country on earth, where grocery stores pour bleach on perfectly edible food in dumpsters and write it off as a tax deduction, where 4 companies control 85% of the beef and less than 25% of retailers use dynamic pricing to reduce waste, where a family of 5 spends $1,500 a month on groceries with coupons, and where a single mother in the reference footage looked at a receipt for $75 worth of groceries and held up the bag and showed you what was in it: sour cream, salsa, cheese, bacon, taco shells, chips, bread, tortillas, 1 frozen cauliflower, spinach, protein bars, $75. And she asked the question that 100 million Americans are asking every single week: how are you doing this if you have a family? The answer for 14 million children is that they are not. They are going to school hungry, and the country that is supposed to feed them just cut the budget for the program that does. The person closest to rock bottom in this country is not who you think it is. It is the 60-year-old who did everything right and just discovered that everything right was not enough. A man in the reference footage sat down and said something that changed the way I think about who is actually at the bottom in America. He said, "We are living in a retirement nightmare right now with so many people facing homelessness." He said, "When I grew up seeing my parents and then for me working decades, you think retirement is a time of peace and quiet. You are rewarded for all your hard work. And for so many, it has become a complete nightmare." And he is describing a population that nobody considers when they think about rock bottom. The 60-year-old, the 65-year-old, the 70-year-old. The person who worked for 40 years, who paid into the system every paycheck, who was told that if they saved, if they contributed to the 401k, if they paid their mortgage, if they followed the rules, there would be a floor underneath them when they stopped working. And there is no floor. The National Institute on Retirement Security says the typical working American has less than $1,000 saved for retirement. The 87-year-old veteran in the reference footage is splitting a studio apartment with a roommate and working at Costco 3 days a week because Social Security does not cover rent. An 87-year-old veteran sharing a studio, working retail, after serving his country and working his entire adult life, and he is not an outlier. He is a demographic. The Census Bureau reports that approximately 14.7% of Americans over 65 live at or near the poverty line. That is roughly 7.5 million elderly Americans who are 1 medical bill, 1 rent increase, 1 car repair, 1 bad month away from homelessness. And 25% of older adults depend on Social Security for more than 90% of their income. Their entire existence is balanced on a check that averages $1,907 per month. The average rent in the United States is $1,700. That leaves $207 for food, gas, medicine, insurance, phone, and everything else a human being needs to survive. $207 for an entire month. And Social Security is insolvent by fiscal year 2032. When it hits, benefits get cut 24 to 28% automatically by law. That $1,907 becomes $1,370. And the $207 that was left after rent becomes negative $330. The math goes below zero. And the person who did everything right, the person who worked 40 years and paid taxes and raised a family and contributed to a system that promised to take care of them, discovers that the promise was broken before they ever had a chance to collect on it, And the woman in the reference footage said, "I have seen video after video of people talking about going into foreclosure, eviction notices, living paycheck to paycheck. She said, I remember thinking if I made this much money, I would be living stress-free. I make that money now. In fact, I make more. My husband makes good money. And we are barely making it." And she said, "All I can picture is these billionaires sitting in their little offices laughing about how poor we are." And she is right to picture that. Because the system was not designed to create a floor under her. The system was designed to extract from her until there was nothing left to extract. And for the 60-year-old who followed every rule, the extraction is almost complete. The 401k has been raided. The savings have been spent. The pension is gone. The Social Security check is about to shrink. And the person who spent their life building a foundation is discovering that the foundation was built on sand, and the sand is washing out from underneath them. And nobody is coming to help, because the people who are supposed to help are $39 trillion in debt and paying $1 trillion a year in interest and governing with 7% confidence and trading stocks on insider information, while the floor disappears. That is rock bottom for the person who did everything right. And it is the cruelest version of rock bottom there is, because they cannot even tell themselves they should have tried harder. They did try. It was not enough. And the country that promised it would be enough lied. Brookings published a report yesterday confirming that nearly half of American households cannot make ends meet, and the states where it is worst will shock you. Yesterday, Brookings, one of the most respected research institutions in the world, they published a report titled States of Affordability, and the headline finding is this. In 2024, only 55% of American households were able to make ends meet. 45% were not. Nearly half the country cannot afford the basics. Not luxury, not comfort. The basics. Rent, food, electricity, medicine, gas, phone, insurance, the things you need to not die, and 45% of households cannot cover them. And the state-by-state data is where the picture gets truly horrifying because it reveals that this is not a poverty problem confined to places you would expect. In Hawaii, only 39% of households make ends meet. That means 61% of the people living in what is supposed to be paradise cannot afford to exist there. In New York, less than half can make ends meet. In California, less than half. In Oregon, less than half. In West Virginia, less than half. In Louisiana, less than half. In Kentucky, less than half. And a Plilo poll published in January 2026 confirmed it from the demand side. Nearly half of Americans say basic necessities, including groceries, housing, utilities, healthcare, and transportation, have become difficult to afford, not slightly inconvenient. Difficult to afford. The 5 categories that define the minimum threshold of a functional life are all now difficult for nearly half the country. And the new Trader U analysis from January 2026 broke down what the middle class specifically is experiencing, and the findings explain why rock bottom is no longer reserved for the poor. 1/3 of the American middle class cannot afford necessities. 28% have taken on debt to finance daily expenses, not emergencies, not medical bills, daily expenses, groceries, gas, utilities. They are borrowing to eat. Roughly half of Americans tapped into their savings to meet routine expenses. Savings that were supposed to be for retirement, for emergencies, for their children's education, are being consumed by the monthly cost of existing. And 30% of workers have relocated to lower-cost housing, which for many means moving away from their jobs, their schools, their communities, and their support networks. And the ACA International report from February 2026 identified the psychological mechanism that makes this so devastating. They said consumers do not track the Fed's inflation percentages. They track mental anchors. The $5 footlong that now costs $14. The car insurance premium that feels like a second car payment. The grocery bill that used to be $200 and is now $400 for the same items. These mental anchors are the moments where a person compares what they pay today to what they paid 2 years ago, and the distance between those numbers tells them that something is fundamentally broken. And they are right, it is broken. Brookings confirmed it yesterday. 45% of American households cannot make ends meet. And that was before the Iran war pushed gas past $4.55, and groceries hit a 3-year high, and diesel hit a record in Chicago, and the fertilizer wave that arrives in September was even factored in. The Brookings number is the before picture. The after picture arrives this fall, and if nearly half the country cannot make ends meet right now at current prices, what happens when every price goes up 20 to 40% over the next 6 months? The answer is that nearly half becomes most. And most means a majority of American households living in the richest country in the history of civilization cannot afford the basics of survival. And you do not come back from that without something fundamental changing. Either the prices come down, or the wages go up, or the country admits that the system it built does not work for the people inside it. And none of those things are happening. They are coming for your electricity next. The government just proposed eliminating the program that keeps 6 million poor families from having their power shut off. LIHTP, that stands for the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. Most Americans have never heard of it, and the 6 million households that depend on it are about to find out what happens when the one thing keeping their lights on disappears. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities documented that the current administration has proposed eliminating LIHTP entirely in its 2026 budget. Eliminating it. Not reducing it, not reforming it. Deleting it from the federal budget. And LIHTP is not a luxury program for people who want cheaper electricity. It is the last resort safety net for families who cannot afford to heat their homes in winter or cool them in summer. It pays a portion of the utility bill for households that would otherwise face shutoff. And when the power gets shut off for a family with children, that is not an inconvenience. That is a child sleeping in a house with no heat in February or no air conditioning in August. That is food rotting in the refrigerator because the power went out and there is no money to replace it. That is a person on home oxygen whose machine stops running. That is an elderly diabetic whose insulin that requires refrigeration goes bad. And the proposal to eliminate LIHTP comes at the exact moment that energy costs are surging because of the Iran war. Electricity prices rose an average of 6.5% nationally between May 2024 and May 2025, according to the Congressional Bipartisan Affordability Agenda. And they project that AI data centers will consume 2 to 3 times more energy by 2028, driving electricity demand up another 16% and prices up with it. The woman in San Diego whose electric bill is $400 a month with no air conditioning. The woman who had someone come look and they said that is just normal. She is the middle of the distribution. She is not the bottom. At the bottom are the 6 million families on LIHTP who are paying less than that because the program subsidizes the difference. And when that subsidy disappears, those families get the full bill. And the full bill at current energy prices is already unaffordable for them. That is why they are on LIHTP. And at summer 2026 energy prices, with natural gas following oil into the stratosphere and the grid under stress from AI demand and summer heat, that full bill could be 30 to 50% higher than last year. And the family that was surviving on the LPTP subsidy is now staring at a utility shutoff notice that they cannot pay. And in 29 states, utilities can legally disconnect service for non-payment, even during extreme temperatures. A family in Texas can have their power shut off during a heat wave. A family in Michigan can lose heat in January, and a study by the National Energy Assistance Directors Association found that families who lose energy assistance are 4 times more likely to go without food and 3 times more likely to experience homelessness within 6 months. Losing electricity does not just mean losing comfort. It means losing the refrigerator that stores your food, the stove that cooks it, the light that lets your child do homework, the phone that connects you to your employer, the internet that lets you apply for jobs, and the climate control that keeps your body temperature compatible with survival. Electricity in 2026 is not a utility, it is life support. And the government just proposed unplugging 6 million families from it. And the reference footage man who said he does not understand how people are doing it at $15 to $18 an hour, how they are keeping themselves alive and a roof over their head, he should add one more question. How are they keeping the lights on? Because for 6 million families, the answer was LIHTP, and LIHTP is about to be gone. Trailer parks used to be what people joked about. In 2026, they are the American dream, and most people cannot even afford that. A man in the reference footage said something that I have not been able to stop thinking about. He said the biggest recession indicator to me is that folks cannot even afford to live in trailers anymore. And then he said something that cut even deeper. He said, I remember when you used to get bullied. If kids found out you lived in a trailer, they would call you poor trailer trash. Nowadays, that is the American dream. Maybe if I just pick myself up by my bootstraps and I work real hard, maybe I will be able to afford a single wide. And then he went on Facebook Marketplace. They wanted $50,000 for a 1980 single wide in a trailer park, plus $800 a month in lot rent. For a trailer that was built 46 years ago. And then he went to Clayton Homes, the largest manufactured housing company in the country, which is owned by Berkshire Hathaway, which is owned by Warren Buffett. Some of the new single wides were going for $90,000, and that is just the unit. That does not include the land, the permits, the hookups, the foundation. the transportation. When those are added, a single wide manufactured home can cost $120,000 to $150,000. And a double wide can run $200,000 or more for a trailer. In a country where the median home price is $412,000 and a mortgage payment now requires $111,000 in household income that only 30 to 35% of the population earns. And the man said, "What is lower than low class? Because that is me." And he was not joking. He was describing his actual economic position. A working man in America in 2026 who cannot afford to buy a trailer. And this is not an isolated story. The manufactured housing industry has been consolidating for years. A handful of companies, primarily Berkshire Hathaway, through Clayton Homes and 21st Mortgage Corporation, now control the majority of manufactured home production and lending. And the business model is designed to extract maximum value from the people who have the fewest options. Lot rent in mobile home parks has been rising 5 to 10% annually in many markets. The residents own the trailer but rent the land underneath it. And when the lot rent goes up, the resident cannot take the trailer and leave because moving a manufactured home costs $5,000 to $15,000, and many older units are too fragile to survive the move. So the resident is trapped, paying whatever the park owner charges because the alternative is homelessness. And in recent years, private equity firms have been buying up mobile home parks across the country, raising lot rents, adding fees, reducing maintenance, and treating the captive residents as a guaranteed revenue stream because those residents have nowhere else to go. The Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and Last Week Tonight have all documented the practice, and the residents are disproportionately elderly, disabled, and low income. They are the people who cannot afford a house and cannot afford an apartment and ended up in the one form of housing that used to be genuinely affordable, and now it is not. And the woman in the reference footage who said she was paying $2,300 a month for a house she owns with her husband and just got a letter saying it is going up $330 to $2,600 is living the middle-class version of the same squeeze. The trailer park resident paying $800 in lot rent plus $500 in trailer payments is living the bottom version. And the person sleeping in a storage unit for $150 a month is living the version that comes after the trailer becomes unaffordable. The ladder used to have rungs. You could climb it. You could at least grab a low rung and hold on. In 2026, the rungs have been pulled out from the bottom up. The storage unit replaced the trailer. The trailer replaced the apartment. The apartment replaced the house. And the house replaced the dream. Each rung was supposed to be temporary, a stepping stone. Instead, each one has become a permanent ceiling for the person standing on it and an unaffordable fantasy for the person standing below it. And when a working man in America says the American dream is affording a single wide trailer and he still cannot reach it, the ladder does not just have missing rungs, it has been pulled up entirely, and the people at the bottom are not climbing, they are falling, one rung at a time, into a storage unit, into a car, into a tent, into the shadow realm that CNN described, into the 771,000 who were counted on a single night, and then into the uncounted millions who were not. The system did not fail. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. And once you understand that, you will never look at this country the same way again. I need you to hear something that is going to change the way you think about every single thing I have shown you in this video. The system did not fail. The homelessness is not a failure. The medical bankruptcies are not a failure. The hungry children are not a failure. The 87-year-old veteran working at Costco is not a failure. The nurse door dashing at midnight is not a failure. The man who emptied his 401ks is not a failure. The woman living in her car is not a failure. The trailer that cost $90,000 is not a failure. The $400 electric bill is not a failure. None of it is a failure. It is the product. This is what the system produces when it is working correctly. Because the system was not designed to create a floor under you. It was designed to extract from you every layer of the economy that you interact with, your rent, your mortgage, your insurance, your health care, your groceries, your phone bill, your credit card, your student loan, your car payment, every single layer was designed by someone to move money from your pocket into theirs. And when the extraction reaches a point where there is nothing left to extract, you do not land on a safety net. You land on rock bottom. Because the safety net was also designed by the same people who built the extraction system. And they designed it to be as thin as possible so that the maximum number of dollars passes through you on the way up. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a business model. The healthcare system was not designed to keep you healthy. It was designed to be the most profitable healthcare system in the world, and it is. The U.S. spends more per capita on healthcare than any nation on earth, and the outcomes are 49th in life expectancy. The money goes in, the health does not come out. The housing market was not designed to give you a home. It was designed to be an asset class that appreciates. When your home's value goes up, that is the system working. When you cannot afford to buy a home because the value went up, that is also the system working. The food system was not designed to feed you. It was designed to produce profit. When grocery stores pour bleach on edible food in dumpsters and write off the loss as a tax deduction while 14 million children go hungry, that is the system working. When 4 companies control 85% of beef and prices go up while wages stay flat, that is the system working. And the credit system was not designed to help you bridge a gap. It was designed to keep you in a gap. When the poorest borrowers are at 99.2% utilization and paying 23% interest, the credit card company is not losing money, it is making money. On every dollar of interest that the person at rock bottom pays from the paycheck that does not cover rent, the system extracts from the bottom and delivers to the top. That is not a side effect. It is the function. And rock bottom is not where the system fails. Rock bottom is where the system finishes. It has taken everything there is to take, the savings, the retirement, the equity, the credit, the health, the time, the hope, and now there is nothing left to extract, and the person falls out of the system entirely, into a car, into a storage unit, into a tent, into the 771,000. Not because the system broke, because the system completed its cycle. And the reason nobody in power is fixing it is because from their perspective, it is working perfectly. The stock market is up, corporate profits are at record highs, CEO compensation is 350 times the median worker. Congress's stock portfolios outperform the market by 4.4%. Billionaire families spent $2.6 billion on the 2024 election. And the people at the top are not experiencing what the people at the bottom are experiencing. They are experiencing a different country entirely. And they do not want the system to change because the system is producing exactly the outcome they paid for. The extraction continues. The rock bottom population grows, and the space between the two economies widens until it is no longer a gap. It is a canyon, and you are standing at the edge looking down. Rock bottom has a secret that nobody tells you. It is the only place in America where you finally stop falling and start building. And the people who are already there are building something. The people at the top will never understand. I have spent this entire video showing you the worst of what this country has become. The homelessness, the medical bankruptcies, the hungry children, the gutted safety nets, the unaffordable trailers, the extraction machine. And I know that right now, sitting wherever you are sitting, you feel something heavy in your chest. Maybe anger, maybe sadness, maybe that specific kind of exhaustion that comes from seeing something you already suspected confirmed by data you cannot argue with. And I could end this video there. I could leave you in the dark. Most creators do. They show you the wreckage, and they walk away and they let the algorithm serve you another wreckage video, and the cycle of despair continues and nothing changes. I am not going to do that. Because here is the thing about rock bottom that nobody tells you. Rock bottom is the only place where the falling stops. And when the falling stops, something else begins. A writer named James Christ published a piece in December 2025 titled 2026, The Year We Rebuild on Purpose. And he wrote something that I think is the most honest assessment of where we are that I have read anywhere. He said the hardest part about 2026 is that it will not feel like a fresh start. It will feel like continuing. It will feel like carrying. It will feel like unfinished business. But that is also the opportunity. A year like this strips away fantasy. It forces us back to fundamentals: food, shelter, health, community, truth, dignity. And he said when the network fails, everyone feels it. When the network holds, people survive things they should not have to survive. And in Minneapolis in March 2026, the Minnesota Reformer documented exactly what that network looks like when it holds. Volunteers in bulletproof vests hauling 50-pound bags of flour at a community kitchen while neighbors stood watch with walkie-talkies. Teens and seniors portioning food side by side. A community feeding itself because nobody else was going to do it. And Operation Hope published a survey 1 week ago showing that only 23% of Americans are optimistic about the economy. But the same survey found that people who received financial literacy coaching and engaged in proactive financial planning reported improved resilience and outlook even in the middle of the crisis, not because their circumstances changed, because their agency changed. They stopped feeling like victims of the system and started feeling like people who were building something inside the wreckage. And the New Republic published a piece about mutual aid networks and said something that should be the motto for this moment. Resilient communities do not arise out of an emergency. They come together before that through 1,000 little acts on a regular basis. 1,000 little acts, not a revolution, not a movement, not a viral video. 1,000 small, invisible, unglamorous decisions made by ordinary people who refuse to let the system's definition of rock bottom be the final word on their lives. A neighbor who checks on the elderly woman next door. A church that opens its kitchen on Tuesday nights. A parent who starts a garden in the backyard and teaches the kid next door how to grow tomatoes. A stranger who pays the electric bill of a family she has never met through a mutual aid fund. A trucker who delivers donated food to a food bank on a route he was going to drive anyway. A nurse who finishes her 12-hour shift and instead of door dashing goes home and sleeps because she finally got a roommate who splits the rent and the math works now. These are not headlines. These are not policy proposals. These are the 1,000 little acts that hold a community together when the systems that were supposed to hold it have been gutted, defunded, and sold for parts. And here is my promise to you. I am going to keep making these videos. I am going to keep showing you the data. I am going to keep telling you the truth, even when the truth makes you want to turn off the screen and pretend everything is fine. But I am also going to keep ending every single video with the same message, because the message is more important than the data. Build your emergency fund. Pay down your debt. Stock your pantry. Learn a skill they cannot automate. Know your neighbors. Build community where you live. Not because these things will save you from the system, but because these things will save you from the loneliness that the system needs you to feel in order to keep extracting from you without resistance. Because rock bottom is not the end. Rock bottom is where the extraction stops and the building begins. And the 771,000 people on the street, and the millions in the shadow realm, and the 530 000 families, bankrupted by medical bills, and the 14 million hungry children, and the 87-year-old veteran at Costco, and the nurse at midnight, and the man in the storage unit, and the woman driving on the highway with nowhere to stop, every single one of them is a human being. Not a statistic, not a data point, not a number in a video like this one. A person, with a name, with a story, with a reason they ended up where they are, that has nothing to do with their character and everything to do with a system that was never built to catch them. And if you know one of those people, and you do, even if you do not know you do, the most important thing you can do today is not share this video. It is knock on their door, call their phone, say their name, and tell them you see them, because rock bottom is survivable, but only if someone is there when you land. Be that someone.